The assigned gospel lesson for today is from Matthew 25 about the sheep and the goats. And when I, 4 or 5 days ago, when Pastor Dietmar asked me for what I wanted for the gospel lesson, I was thinking, well, what I'm thinking about is what you just heard. The kings of the Gentiles lord it over everyone. It's not supposed to be like that for you. But there was an event in my life on Friday that made me wish I had kept with Matthew 25. So I'm going to read a couple portions of Matthew 25. When the Son of Man comes as king, with all the angels with him, and he will sit on his royal throne, and then he's going to judge and separate the sheep from the goats. Now, I can't ever read Matthew 25 without thinking of the song by Cake, Sheep Go to Heaven, Goats Go to Hell. That's the refrain in the song. It doesn't have any, I can't ever figure out how it connects with any of the other lyrics in the song, but Cake is here. He will put the righteous people, the sheep, or the sheep on his right and the others on his left. And he will say to the people on his right, "Come, for I was hungry and you fed me, thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you received me in your homes. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me." And the righteous will answer, "When, Lord, did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we ever see you a stranger and welcome you into our homes, or naked and clothe you? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will reply, "I tell you, whenever you did this for one of the least important of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it for me." So it's Christ the King Sunday. And think about some of the Christmas songs we're going to do, particularly Handel's Messiah, Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And we get all these subtle messages about Jesus being a king. And that has subtle and negative effects on how we live. So I drove by King Jesus on Friday. I was on my way out of Manhattan, and Jesus was standing in the dividing line between 2 lanes of traffic, just where the Henry Hudson Parkway comes up and dumps around to go straight in to the George Washington Bridge. It's a common place for homeless people to beg. King Jesus this time was a woman with a bent spine, dirty, ill-kept clothing. She didn't look anywhere near warm enough for the temperature on Friday, with a large, simple sign that said, "Homeless, help." That was Jesus, and I drove by. The traffic was not stopping, which is amazing for the Henry Hudson Parkway. And so it was going to be incredibly inconvenient for the poor drivers behind me if I stopped to roll down my window. Plus, I had forgotten, as I usually do when driving in New York, to have a few bills on the divider so that I could give them to her. And I drove by Jesus. I drove by King Jesus. King Jesus was a poor man. And in this reading from Matthew 25 that I was so happy you were picking up in the children's sermon, Jesus was among the least of these, the poorest of these. So this idea of caring for the poor is not a romantic idea. It's not a lofty metaphor. It's Jesus' reality. And I need to say at the moment that I'm plagiarizing a friend of mine, Reverend Susan Bach, for a lot of this sermon, but I've kind of filtered it through me, so it's not exactly plagiarism, but close. Jesus is talking about the smallest, most insignificant people in the world, the expendables. And we treat so much of the human population as expendable. Jesus was a poor man, not a king. Now, the Bible tries to turn him into a king. Think of those words from Handel's Messiah that come out of the book of Revelation. Think of his trial before Pilate. And Jesus wouldn't have any of it. You say I'm a king, but look around, Pilate. If I were a king, would I be standing here all alone about to be executed? And even if we try to grab hold of the Bible's claims of Jesus' kingship, we've got to look at the reality of the history of the church. The church took the idea of Jesus as king and ran with it in the most treacherous ways by taking it literally, that Jesus would be a king the way other kings are kings. We have used it in the church across centuries to justify unspeakable human suffering, holy wars, colonial genocides in the name of God, inquisitions, executions, including Jesus' own. The church has written countless hymns about Jesus as king: crown him with many crowns, lift high the cross, onward Christian soldiers, Jesus shall reign. Now, Christ the King Sunday is a new thing, proclaimed by Pope Pius XI in 1925. Barely 100 years we've been celebrating Christ the King Sunday. And Pius initiated it very specifically because he was worried about dictators in Europe. And he was very upset with modern ideas. He wanted the church to hang on to its beliefs unchanged for thousands of years. And so he proclaimed Christ the King as a means of reminding the church that we claim power, and we claim power over other people. That's what he was trying to do. Now, the world didn't pay a whole lot of attention to this. That's been pretty obvious over the last 100 years. But Christ the King is a cultural metaphor, and a dangerous one. Ironically, especially for the heart and the life of the church. Because when we focus on Jesus as ruler, that's not why God took on flesh, not why God became incarnate at Christmas to live among us. He didn't come to rule us. There is a way of thinking about the incarnation that comes fundamentally out of the Greek Orthodox Church, that God became human so that we could become divine. It's called theosis. So if you remember osmosis from high school biology, anybody remember high school? Plants take up water. In Greek Orthodox theology, the whole process of our life together is that God enters into us and comes up through us and transforms us into being God. So God became human, not so much to shed blood for us or to die for us or to save us or judge us or condemn us or to demand our groveling obedience like other kings do. That would be too easy. God became like us so that we could become like God. Now that's a tall order. I've been a Christian for a long time and I'm nowhere near that goal yet. We would so much rather that Jesus would just go ahead and rule, be our king, tell us what to do, when to do us, and to empower it to happen, victorious, exalted over us and the world, while we, his hapless subjects, lift him up higher than he ever expected to be lifted up in his own life. But he called us friends. He did not call us subjects. And friends don't make their friends into kings. Kings, Jesus would remind us, only hang out with other royals. But I was with people like those who gather at your train stations, who line up at your food and soup kitchens, those of you who sleep on park benches and heating exhausts during the winter. I came across a story of a famous sculpture of a park bench with a homeless person all wrapped up, sleeping on the park bench. And what are sticking out are feet with nail marks. It's an incredibly realistic sculpture, so realistic that the story is told that a woman who saw it displayed in her town phoned the police because there was a homeless person sleeping on a park bench. That's how Jesus came. Kings are coddled by servants, kept safe from people by legions of soldiers and guards. But Jesus tells us, I was always swarmed by the people, my people, and they were unclean, and I embraced them and loved them. Even their dirty bodies, washing their dirty feet, holding their ragged, runny-nosed kids in my lap. Royals have militias and bands, and Jesus would say they have servants, they have sycophants, they have velvet robes, golden crowns, a throng of admiring subjects, a little bit like Taylor Swift. But I only had a few friends who pretty much failed me at the end, never had a clue what I was really on about. Now, I wonder why we can't let Jesus be who he really was during his life, the un-king, the servant, in every word and every deed that he did, the servant he longed to become, a person here not to receive, but to give, as it says in Philippians. So I'm very, very disturbed by a movement in the Christian church that's been around now for 20 years or more, called Christian nationalism. That the point of the church, the point of being Christian, is to take over, to rule, to tell everybody else on the planet what they should do and how they should do it and what their lives should be like. Rather than listening to Jesus, who was a servant, a slave, a caregiver to all, regardless of who they were. He was a servant leader, trying to bring us into equality and mutuality. He led into a future of love for all people, a future for inclusion of all people, a future of hope for the resources of the world to be shared with everyone. How long will it be that we turn our hearts in another direction? Until we turn our hearts into that direction, we turn our hearts away from power, privilege, status, safety, certainty, and wealth. Those are the things that monarchs, kings, presidents of countries want. Love, by nature, gives up all those things. Love, by its nature, gives up all those things, just like God gave them up, Philippians. Choosing love over kingly prerogatives, because only love saves us, only love endures, only love leaves home, only love wins. We don't vanquish our enemies with battles and soldiers and power and police. Jesus as king would be very easy. We'd know our place. We'd know what we're supposed to do and what everyone else is supposed to do. But God has left it in our hands, in the hands of his body, the church, to be held together by friendship, courage, forgiveness, and servant love. I wonder what the church could be if we forsook all our fortressed tradition and beauty and safety and comfort and wandered out into a broken world that doesn't need more kings. If we laid down our hearts and our lives for service, God became human that we could become God. So if I believed that, what would change about me? I think I'd have to look at some words of Teresa of Avila. She said, Christ has no body now but yours. No hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes through which he looks with compassion on this world. Yours are the feet on which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands through which he blesses the world. He has no other body now but ours. So on this feast of Jesus' kingship, if we lift him up, may it be that we see his life better, to love him as he is for who he is. A sovereign who can only rule from one warm, wide open, oh so human heart, one life at a time, like yours and mine. God, let it be. Amen.